may be wondering, okay, you were inside that Mandela Effect, Cynthia. So what was it like for you? Um, it felt like I almost died. So when I first heard about this, a gentleman contacted me from Canada, and he said, "This is going to sound weird, and you don't know me, and I hope you're not offended, but I mean, it's like I'm so glad you're here. Start there. I'm so surprised and so happy to see you because I'm pretty certain that you died." And so I wrote back to him and said, "Okay, I'm not offended. I'm really interested and not offended at all. This is what I study. Tell me more. How did you find out? When did I die? What was the cause? Tell me what the details were." Because I had not told anyone that I had almost died at the end of 2016.
Welcome to the Light the Day podcast, where we explore spiritually transformative experiences. I'm your host, Julie Cluff, and I just want to say thank you to everyone out there who is commenting, liking, sharing the videos because I'm really enjoying your comments and your interaction here. So, really appreciate you being part of the community. Today, I'm really excited to welcome Cynthia Sue Larson. Wow, Cynthia, like even before we hit record, we had such an interesting conversation. So I'm excited to hit record and let everybody in on the conversation. How are you today?
Awesome. So good to be with you today.
So
Yeah.
good. Yeah, share a little bit about yourself so people have an idea of where you're coming from.
Okay. Well, I think the easiest thing to know about me is I've been studying mind matter interaction, which is consciousness meets physics, for about 26, 28 years now. Depends on how you measure it. But I've had my website since 1998, realityshifters.com. Been publishing a monthly newsletter about reality shifts when consciousness changes the physical world. And I've got a background in physics. I studied at UC Berkeley. That's where I got my degree. Yes, my professors know that I'm doing this. Yes, they are pretty. They're fans actually, and one of them is a really top fan. Not my professor now, but a very. There are some amazing people that understand that what I'm writing about is not crazy. It's not crackpot. It's actually going to be the direction that we're all heading with science of the future in terms of recognizing that there's actually been some secret science, if you will, that has been held back from us. And I know that sounds like conspiracy, but it's part of disclosure. This is the year of disclosure. So if anybody's into that, we were talking a little bit about that before.
Yeah.
We're wondering, like, what were they talking about? Oh, Steven Spielberg's new movie. Just asking if you'd ever seen a UFO. And I think people, if they have, go ahead and put that in the comments if you're looking forward to Disclosure Day, and or if you've seen it, what you think of it.
Yeah.
Because the other thing I was noticing is that Steven Spielberg, he's had his finger on the pulse of the topic of basically it's consciousness. You may think, why does it matter that we see UFOs? Why does any of that? Why is it relevant? What's the point? And it really does matter because it ties into our own consciousness and what we know about reality. So when you look at what his movie showed us, he says it's not science fiction. He says, what does he call it? It's like science exploration or something. And I think that's a great way to look at it. That's what I've been doing too, looking at mind matter interaction. It's also supposed to be impossible, more like it's taboo. But when we notice that things move around, apparently, like if you're in a hurry and you need to get ready, I think most of us have had this experience, and that's the time you're most likely to lose something like your car keys or your wallet. And believe me, it's not where you know you put it. And it's not, you know that you're not making this up. It's not your imagination, but it honestly is not where you put it. And that's because there is a mind matter interaction effect that happens like that.
Yeah.
And and then for people that work the other side of the equation, programming a parking spot, sending loving healing to a favorite pet or family member or friend, then you can experience the benefits of that as well. So these are all consciousness impacts, effects, and it's kind of like forbidden science in a way. Although there are people that study it, and we talked about that a little bit before the interview too. I want people to feel included, so I'm bringing in the other topics. We talked. I thought Julie that you said IONS, Institute of Noetic Sciences. So I was talking about Dean Radin and some of the wonderful experiments he's doing that prove without a doubt that there is a connection between what we're thinking and what happens. He tested it with an interferometer. I was lucky to be included in that. experiment. And then we also talked about IANDS, IANDS. And that's a group that have so much respect for. So if people don't know what that is, check it out. And if you feel like you can't be around the people that you need, like your true family, where's my family? Where's my community? Because you're thinking about deep questions and you care about the nature of reality and who you really are, then there is a group for that, a group for all of us. And it's IANDS.
Yeah, which stands for the International Association of Near-Death Studies. And as I was telling you before we went live, it, the first time I went to an online sharing group with IANDS, IANDS, I felt like I could breathe for the first time because I could talk about some of these mystic, sometimes unexplained experiences. But really, when we get right down to it, we are, as humans, we are so egotistical. We think we know everything. But even if we just look at our arm and we look at our skin, I have no idea what's going on inside there with all those cells and all those. Like, I have this like fourth grade biology understanding of it. And yet here I am functioning, picking up my hand and speaking and looking and seeing. And it's really fascinating. And we think, and when we start to consider all the aspects of our world, just our world, that haven't even been explored, much less everything else in the universe and beyond, it only makes sense that there are a lot of mysteries out there. And you mentioned conspiracy, kind of the conspiracy theory thing, right? But if we look back on history, how many of the things that we believe now are like for real, this happened, this was the experience. But when it first came out, everyone was calling it, they weren't calling it a conspiracy theory because that's a nomenclature of our day. But they were saying something similar, like that's not real. People were going to jail or they were even put to death for their theories that eventually came out like the Earth isn't the center of the solar system,
Right.
right? Early scientists were persecuted for the theory that the sun was at the center. So it's all very, very interesting, fascinating, a little mind scrambling. So we're really lucky to have you here today to help us maybe unscramble and maybe scramble some more. Who knows? We'll see where we go.
Yeah. So the work that I've done, getting back to the introduction of my work and myself, is that for the last, well, since 1998, so it's 20 going on 28 years, I've been writing books, articles in that monthly newsletter, all about the way that our thoughts and feelings do have an influence on the physical reality around us. It's not your imagination. And you can actually calm down, ground yourself, and the keys can show up right where you know you put them, that they were not there when you were looking. You can see amazing things like that. And this is the way reality actually does operate, which is, it sounds outrageous. It sounds like no, but most of us actually have had these experiences. So my first book about it was a book called Reality Shifts that was sort of, I just published it so I could do workshops and teach people about this phenomenon where things are appearing, disappearing, transforming, and transporting, and we're experiencing changes in time. And then I published a book about the energy field, the human aura, called Aura Advantage. And then the next book that came out that I wrote, well, I wrote about high energy money, because people want to know, how can we do this for prosperity? Yes. And it sort of depends on your personality type, how that works. And then I wrote a book about quantum jumps after reality shifts. Reality shifts did come out in print eventually, so people could read it and not just spiral bound through my website or the PDF ebook. And then after quantum jumps was the book that you can share with your friend or a physics professor at UC Berkeley, somebody who wants to know, like, what are you talking about, and how can you prove that any of this is actually happening? And then my most recent book is The Mandela Effect and its Society, Awakening from Me to We. Very ambitious book, not just giving the history, the science, and the philosophy and all the related details about the Mandela effect, but going forward as to why is it here right now? What are we able to do with this? Because to me, it seems like we've been given a toolkit, and we're at the phase as human evolution to recognize that some strange things are happening to our collective history, and some of us have collective alternate memories of things, such as Nelson Mandela. Some people remember he died in prison in the 1980s. That's where the name Mandela Effect came from. And some people say, well, that's impossible because we all know he went on to become president of South Africa. How could that have happened if he died in prison? And that's the kind of conundrum where you might remember things both ways and feel like that is so confusing. And you can take a tour of your grocery store and see dozens of these things in products. Look at movies and see the same thing. So that's a real high-speed summary of my work. And my personal interest in IANS is that I remember before I was born, I was kind of hanging out and resting and relaxing, and then coming in. It's called born aware when you come into this life and you haven't quite forgotten how blissed out that feels. So for me to hang out with people who get it and go to these IANDS groups for the International Association of Near-Death Studies, those people, those are our people. Anybody watching this conversation, yes, you're one of these people. If you're wondering, am I included? Are you still interested in this topic? Then yes, yeah, absolutely.
You're included, 100%. So yeah, wow, that is there's so much to dive into. I don't even know where to start. So I'm gonna let you start where you feel like you would like to start on some of the effects that you have found in this thought continuum, the way that our thoughts and our feelings are interacting with our field and interacting with time and space and reality as we approach it or we experience it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I started noticing that reality was changing when I was a little girl, actually, and people I believed in and trusted would be talking as if something different had happened that I knew had not been the case. It was not my history, not my memory. Like my parents would say, like they made a promise when we were traveling around the world that some wood carved furniture that they purchased they were going to reassemble it after it made its long trek via boat. It would take weeks to get to our house. They were building a new house. My parents designed it. And anyway, when it got there, then they were supposed to take pictures of it and send it back to the wood carvers. I heard them say this. So there was a long wait involved. It took months for the house to get finished, and then months for the furniture to arrive, and then got reassembled and then polished, and it took a long time. Finally, it was all in place. It looked gorgeous. And I said, and now we take the pictures, right? And my parents looked at me blankly, like, what pictures? And I said, well, to send back to the wood carver so they can see it. And my parents, they don't lie and they don't make things up. And they said they never made such a promise. And I know for a fact I heard it. So I didn't make a big deal out of it. But that was one of the first times that I was very aware that absolutely there's something else going on here to reality.
You
That
know,
it's not,
that's, oh, go ahead.
yeah.
Go forward. Yeah.
Well, but I was a kid, so I was a teenager, young teenager. What year was it? I must have been like 14. I don't remember exactly how old I was, 15. Anyway, young. So I didn't have any place to put an experience like that. Now I would say, okay, that is a definite reality shift. You've definitely experienced something different than another observer right next to you. We have science experiments that prove that that happens, which I've mentioned in my newest book has the latest studies that in my book about Mandela Effect, I include that study. So absolutely we can say that there's a basis for this, that you can have two observers in the same place at the same time, observing supposedly the same thing, but they report back differently. They report back two different outcomes, two different possible realities. And this is absolutely true. That was a 2019 paper that was published, which I think it did win an award, rightly so, because it was one of the most important physics papers I've seen in my lifetime.
Mm.
But in my childhood experience, I had nobody to really take this to. I had my own bizarre memory at that point, like file this one in the X files for weird. And I had a lot of those. Like I met my future self when I was a young girl. So I had a lot of things that were showing me quite constantly in case I needed a little nudge, and I think I did because I was very ensconced in this Western reality,
Hmm.
um, very inculcated with that whole group think of course, you can't change anything that's already happened. Well, the double slit experiment would beg to differ. It proves that a future decision can absolutely affect the past. So we know that happens. So anyway,
Fascinating.
yeah, it's so interesting. But people may notice things like some of the common ones would be the fruit of the loom cornucopia. If you remember that there was a cornucopia, then that's a collective alternate memory or a Mandela effect.
That's the
Um,
way I remember it.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
big one for me too. I remember that. I remember Tinkerbell on Sunday night for the Wonderful World of Disney. Tinkerbell would come in. I just would watch it just for this animated thing. She'd fly in, hover over the castle, and go tink, and the sparkles and fireworks would go off. Now there's no Tinkerbell. That never happened. That was never
What?
part of.
That's one I haven't even heard. I
Yeah,
remember Tinkerbell too.
that's the whole reason I'd watch it. And then I'd see, do I want to watch the rest of this? Maybe not. But I had to see that. Please, just let me see that. And then all is right with the world. It just felt so good. And so for that to be now gone, never there, you can look it up now. Last I checked, it still wasn't there. Never was. But you and I remember it. How is it possible that that's the question. How can we both have this memory? Is it like it starts feeling like reality is very malleable, like it's like we're in a waking dream. And that's what's so interesting to me because that is exciting when you look at the fact that the insoluble problems of our time, anything at all, global warming, everything, anything and everything. What if collectively we can change that the way we perhaps collectively removed Tinkerbell because we knew that would get to us. Like, but I remember that. I want to see that again. You'd have to have someone create it from AI or something, or an artist create it now to see
Interesting.
it.
Wow. I had no idea. That's one that I've heard a few of these. The GIF and Jiffy, the Fruit of the Loom, the Mandela Effect, those things. But that's one that I hadn't heard before, and I remember Tinkerbell too. So I didn't realize that we're now believing Tinkerbell wasn't there. But even from my own life, I can point to a few things. I've been sharing with people, I was in a rollover car accident with my youngest children. This was 19 years ago. And my two youngest passed away in that accident. And that's what brought me to where I am right now and the work that I do and so forth, right? But it's like I tell people, like I see time instead of as a continuum, I see it more as a pond, and each moment we're dropping something else into it, it's rippling out in every direction.
Yes.
And that's what it feels like to me now. Another experience I had several years ago was I had written, like we all did at the time, I had written a little note on a scrap of paper and it was important. And it was several weeks later, I thought, I don't know what happened to that. I couldn't find it anywhere. I didn't even know where else to look for it. And then a couple of days later, I walk into my house and it's sitting in the middle of the floor in front of me. Now, I
Right.
can guarantee you I didn't walk over it several times over those weeks and not notice it because it was literally right in the middle of the floor.
Right.
So, how do we explain those type of occurrences when my mind is wanting to bring this paper back into my field of existence and then suddenly it appears.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's yeah, that kind of thing. It's like the keys that are gone when you're looking for them, you're in that hurry, and they're not where they should be. And you check everywhere. You even check there again. And then maybe you calm down, ground yourself, relax, and check, and that there they are, right where they should have been the whole time.
Hmm.
It is that kind of thing. You can play with this sometimes because if you really love something, really need it, sometimes it'll come back. I've done that with spice, like a spice I was making a pumpkin pie and the nutmeg was missing, and so it was not in the cupboard. So I know that this can happen. So I know that the spice can show up right in front, right where it should be. I know it's not there. I move things around. It's not hiding behind something. So I shut the cupboard, walk around the house, come back to the kitchen, open the cupboard, check, it's not there. And I do that like 5 or 6 times. But the whole time, I'm just getting more and more relaxed, more grounded, more just confident. Like it's going to show up. Like you're expecting a friend. Like are they here yet? They're not here yet. Are they here yet? So you can actually do that with money, with spices, with anything. And that's what's so interesting about reality. That you can play with it in a way that we've not been taught to be playful. And so
Yeah.
that's what I'm hoping people, if they get one thing out of our conversation today, that would be it, to be playful with your reality.
Yeah.
And and I love your idea of looking at time like a pond, like it's all connected. And I think that's something that the IANDS people, they start seeing things like that. They start seeing time and space are not, it's not so separate and it's not so disconnected as some people, like our mainstream society, might have you believe.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, and to that illustration, it's like, yes, that accident happened, you know, I have memories of it. My family has memories of it. My children departed during that accident. They're not here. And yet, my experience with the accident today is very different than it was a month after it happened or 6 months after it happened. I have a friend who, and I can't remember all the details of this story, but he's like in high school, he was a part of the yearbook committee. He was, a very central part of the yearbook committee. They had decided to do this whole spread in the middle of the yearbook about, somebody who had passed away and they were honoring them and so forth. It was someone famous. I can't remember who at the time right now, but later on, he's like, this person is still alive. And he went back to his yearbook, and the spread that had been printed in the yearbook was not there. And it kind of reminds me of whole Back to the Future,
Yes,
the film
yes,
that explores this idea of going back into the future. And we see how, as he went back into the future and he's trying not to mess things up so that the current is what it was, but he still messed things up or improved it, depending on how you look at it. But like his, siblings were disappearing. He was disappearing. His siblings were disappearing off the picture because of these shifts. How, in your view today, because you have studied this, you're scientific about it versus the rest of us that are just curious and interested, and how how do you refer to the Mandela effect, and how do you see it at the deeper level?
yeah. And that was the other big, beautiful thing that came up before we started talking. I told you you're the only other person besides Art Bell himself. I think he's got to be like the king of talk radio, isn't he? I mean, one of the best interviewers ever. He's the only other one that ever asked me that. He said, "Would you call this the Mandela effect?" And he was talking about Nelson Mandela dying. And thank you for asking that. And I told him, no, I'd call it a reality shift
Mm,
because Nelson Mandela is one example. In my book, Reality Shifts, Larry Hagman had died and then he was alive again. And I wrote about that in my book from 1998. So it predates the Mandela effect phrase by quite some time, about, 10 years at least. So I think that's interesting that you're the only other one that's asked that question. Because what's in a phrase? Everything's in a phrase. If you call it the Mandela effect, then it sounds like, oh, it's just this little thing and you can dismiss it. It doesn't sound like it affects ourselves and how we consider ourselves to be, who we really are, what reality really is. And the fact that someone could have that spread in their yearbook showing that they died and it was honoring their life, and now they're alive, and that whole thing is missing from the yearbook. People noticed I had died in 2017, and they contacted me. It's in my chapter 3 of my Mandela Effect book. It's a whole chapter of my some of my top weirdest experiences. That definitely counts as a weird experience. Lots of people noticed that I died. Some people knew that there'd been a tribute to me.
Wow.
Someone named Moneybags had done that on YouTube. Someone else noticed Rupert Sheldrake had mentioned me because I'd interviewed him on my podcast, and he was talking about that. But none of the proof that I'd passed away, none of these tributes could be found once I was alive again. And you may be wondering, okay, you were inside that Mandela effect, Cynthia. So what was it like for you? Um, it felt like I almost died. So when I first heard about this, a gentleman contacted me from Canada, and he said, "This is going to sound weird, and you don't know me, and I hope you're not offended, but uh, I mean, it's like I'm so glad you're here." Start there. I'm so surprised and so happy to see you because I'm pretty certain that you died. And so I wrote back to him and said, "Okay, I'm not offended. I'm really interested and not offended at all. This is what I study. Tell me more. How did you find out? When did I die? What was the cause? Tell me what the details were." Because I had not told anyone that I had almost died at the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. I had a
Wow.
really bad, only my parents, after I'd made it through, I told my parents, my sister, my daughters, and my husband that just about killed me. So inside of that, I was willing to die. There was a part of me that I know which part of me died. I know which versions of me. It was the ones that felt like, well, if I get betrayed, then the person who betrayed me can learn from this, and I'm ready to go back. I'd love to be back between lives. I don't want to hassle and fight the fight that's going to be required. There was a legal battle and stuff. I thought, nah, I'd just rather die. So that was one version. Other versions of me realized, wait a minute, my life is not just my own. Yeah, fine, I'd be happy dying, but I'd rather be here. And if it's going to be a challenge, it's going to be a struggle, there's a battle involved, I'll do it because it's worth it for the other people. And that's a very different answer than I had when I was 5 and had a near-death experience. So, very interesting. So I got to see what it's like inside that because I made the choice personally. And as soon as I felt like, okay, I'll fight it, whatever it takes, I'll do it. And it's not for me because that wouldn't be enough of a reason. I'd be like, not,
Mhm.
it's not worth it. I don't need this. But it's for everybody, for me to be there to do the best I can, to share my gifts, whatever they may be, with people the best I can. And so, yeah, I'll deal with the legal matters. It's a big mess. Yeah, I'll deal with all that and the betrayal. Yeah, all of that. I'll take it on. Sure, it's worth it. And then suddenly all those they seemed like insolvable problems. In fact, it was bad. They were like all my buttons were getting pushed at once with that situation. But that started seeming like your revision of the pond and looking at all time and how you're a different person now than 1 month after that rollover accident. I became a different person right then in that moment. And no, pneumonia no longer had a grip on me. I could just feel it was going. It was so weird and so amazing. It's just
Yeah.
like to go from pneumonia to I'm fine. This is not going to kill me at all. It's just like nothing. It was
Interesting.
extraordinary.
I've had these experiences. It's interesting that these experiences have come to mind over the last week or two before we have this conversation. But I realized recently how many times in my life I've had a sudden thought shift that just changed everything. There was a point a few years ago when my husband and I were considering investing our retirement into a business venture, and I was reluctant, and he something he said, and I was like, oh, okay. It just in an instant, and I was all of a sudden relieved, released and relieved from the pressure I was feeling or um, the resistance that I was feeling. It was just gone. And I've had that happen multiple times in my life where just one phrase, one thing happens, I see something and everything shifts. And I don't know how that applies to what we're talking about, but it feels applicable. Is it?
Yeah. But totally. Yeah, it's like you can feel it on the inside when everything shifts. And sometimes you know why. Maybe it's a choice you made, maybe not. In my book, Quantum Jumps, I tie things to choices we make. But the physicist John Archibald Wheeler, he ties outer physical reality to our inner world with questions that we ask. So when you ask a question, you get an answer. And I think on some level, you may have been asking a question like, what's going to happen? How is this going to, even if you didn't do some sort of a divination reading to see like, what do the cards show? What do the stars show or whatever? What do the tea leaves show? Tuning into that intuition to find that out. You can always get that reading just by asking that question, how will this go? And then you can get that sort of a full body response that just sweeps over you and you have a knowingness like it's got to be this way. And
Yeah.
often the intuition can guide us quite well for people who are tuned in that way.
Yeah. Are there other examples of the Mandela effect that really pique your interest?
Yeah, I think the kidneys moving upward out of I remember that a kidney punch could have been fatal. And
Mm,
maybe it still is, but one thing that's definitely happened is if you ask people, like I used to go to martial arts classes and I'd ask people, put your hands where you think your kidneys are. And they'd put their hands on their lower back, like if you'd climbed a big mountain and you just want to rest for a minute, like that. That's not where the kidneys are anymore, but that is where they used to be. And if you
mm,
did kick or punch someone like a martial artist or a boxer would, that's an illegal maneuver because it's so deadly. It can be fatal. Well, that's not where the kidneys are anymore. So for 8 billion people on the planet, we've witnessed, for those of us that remember the evidence, and there's still a little bit of residual evidence that shows, like I found a really old book that talked about such a kidney punch being fatal. But now it doesn't make sense because the kidneys have moved under the relative safety of the rib cage. They've moved up and a
interesting.
little bit, yeah, it's totally different.
Really interesting. What would you say to somebody who says, well, these Mandela effects are just the effects of people's misremembering? Like even when you were sharing that story about your parents and the furniture and the photo, and you remember the whole discussion about the photo, but they didn't. Um, how often is because even in investigations, like police investigations, when we watch the news or something and we've seen where they have said everybody's memories are different over time, people's memories shift and change. How much of that is actually memory shifting and changing? I don't even know if you can answer this question. And how much of that is like the past actually shifted and changed?
I don't think anyone can answer that question yet because don't have studies in this area. When I was talking to Art Bell, I said, I used the phrase, you've got some splaining to do. It was a riff. I think I didn't even notice at the time what a Mandela effect that is. Maybe it became one later because when I said it, I don't think I can't remember now if I was referencing I Love Lucy. Do you remember Ricky Ricardo and
Yes,
Lucille
yes.
Ball? And do you remember that phrase? You've got some
Mhm.
splaining to do.
Lucy,
That
you
was,
have some splaining to do. Yeah.
now he never said that. Never.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, why would you and I remember such a specific phrase? And we know who said it, and we know how he said it and when he said it, but now it's never been said. And Tinkerbell, that never happened. And the cornucopia. So, for people that say it's just misremembering, I don't know the percentage of what it is, but I would direct them to the 2019 paper with the physics study conducted in Edinburgh, Scotland, and also Austria. Um, that's just so amazing that they can prove without a doubt that you can have two observational devices observing six entangled photons through this double slit apparatus and absolutely get two different answers of what's happening right there, right then. That's interesting because it affects now that we've got quantum computers coming up and we've got artificial intelligence coming up. What's going to happen when our top systems are looking into two different realities concurrently? And some of us know that we can navigate that. That's what I write about when been witnessed being, I've bilocated and people have seen me do that. When I'm daydreaming of like, it's a was a cold morning. I didn't want to get out of bed. So I was just relaxing. I was a single mom at the time, divorced from my first husband, two daughters alone in their bedroom. I just started imagining, like you do sometimes, Like, oh, I'm getting up, I'm walking down the hall, I'm flipping on their light. Good morning, girls, time to wake up. I go to the window shade, too heavy for them. They're like 6 and 8. They can't raise the window shade, so I work that very heavy thing, open it up, and rise and shine. And then I go out the door. I imagined all that, and then I hear little voices and the pitter patter of little feet coming my way. I'm still in bed. I've just been imagining this, daydreaming. And then they're like, Mom, they're calling around the house. Mom, like they're looking for me. And then they come into my room. Mom, what are you doing back in bed? I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you mean back in bed? And then I just jump up and I run to their bedroom and their lights on. They never do that, but they could, I guess. The window shade is fully open. That they can't do. And I said, who opened this? You did, Mom. To them, it's not weird. To them, what happened is I came in, did all that, and then went back to bed. So it's like reality provided plausible deniability. So we can both have our realities. I'm sure they'd pass a lie detector test that morning. Did your mom wake you up? Yes, she did. The same way as usual. Yes, she did. And they'd
Yeah.
ask me, did you open that window curtain? No, I did not. We'd all pass. We're all telling the truth. This is quantum logic where you can have yes and no. You can have true and false. You can have two side by side realities. And are we ready for that when our computer systems and our AI does this if we ourselves have not come to terms with it?
Yeah.
Well, this is the big thing, and gets into disclosure too. If you're wondering how do UFOs tie in, because of that forbidden science, because of what we've been told not to look at, like don't look at this, ignore this kind of physics. And I've seen the research on this kind of physics, the mind matter interaction stuff. It goes dark. First first it's DARPA funded, then IARPA, and then the researchers are gone. The the thought controlled light switches. It goes into national security territory. Well, pretty soon everybody's going to have access to AI. Everyone has the ability to work with this technology. So whether we admit that it's happening or not, the technology is already here. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that humanity can step up into this and say, okay, so if we daydream sometimes, you mean that's really happening? Yeah, like how much of the time? I don't know. So that's very analogous to the situation of how much of the time is it a real reality shift versus just a memory? And what are memories when that's the way our entire reality operates? The
Mm-hmm.
memory of your bank account balance, the memory of everything. It's just all memories. But when reality becomes this fluid, are we ready for this? And I say yes. I say, let's accept the challenge. Let's step up to it. We can do this. We've been doing this. We moved our kidneys up. That's amazing. We can do anything, and I know we can. So that's what I'm actually saying with my work, which is much, much more than just Mandela effect. Ha ha ha. Like some funny
Yeah.
story that you tell at a party.
Yeah. Amazing. I want to go back a little bit because I would love for you to share your definition of a couple of terms that we use all the time. And one of those is consciousness, because that's specifically what you're talking about is consciousness. So when you say consciousness, how do you define that word?
Yeah, this is a well, I haven't yet defined it formally in any place, but that would be if I'm going to work on the next book that it needs to go there. And to do it properly, I need to pick up on where Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, the philosopher from the 1600s, where he started. I want to give him credit. Shout out back to the 1600s. One of the two creators of calculus. The notation we still use is his, Leibniz. He said that a first order perception, like when something touches you, then consciousness arises from a second order of observation. This sounds to me like integration and differentiation. If you're wondering, wow, that looks like calculus. Yes, it does. And he took it there, and then it kind of got dropped because these last 400 years of time since the 1600s, that's when the word propaganda was formed.
Mm,
Propaganda by the Catholic Church to mean we have to steer people away from these dangerous thoughts. Now, they didn't burn Leibniz at the stake in this reality, and I hope that never happens in any reality. Um, but when you start recognizing its levels of conscious agency, agency being a term that our current brilliant thinker, Donald Hoffman, who studies vision and consciousness. He talks about reality as like a template on a computer screen. So his idea of conscious agency, he's not the only one. A lot of people in psychology and cognitive psychology talk about metacognition. It's the same thing that Leibniz was talking about. This is a book that I haven't yet been able to write it, but it's something that needs to be written because consciousness, it's like when you first said, I don't know what my hand is doing. I don't know what's going on in my skin, but yet you are one physical being. You're an organism with the combined collective consciousness of all the cells in all the organs in your body. And no matter how small you go to the subquantum level, you've got that too. Are you in communication with all of this? On some level, yes, but it may not be a conscious level of
Hmm.
communication. So
Yeah.
consciousness then becomes a little smidgen. It's sort of like the between red and violet. All of our senses have a very narrow bandwidth, as does our level of conscious agency with who we think we are. So the yogi masters that can do these cities, like they can bilocate, all the stuff I'm talking about, they can do all sorts of things. Like, and this is normal. It's totally normal when you practice moving your level of conscious agency, which is what our AI is going to be able to do this, by the way. Again, humans, let's get on board with this. But it's been a national secret. It's been like, don't look at this, don't study this. So what we're talking about is a taboo area of science that's been a very deadly area for anyone to delve into it. But that's the past because now AI is it's almost like it's out of the barn almost. Even though people are saying pause it, slow it down. You may wonder, why does this matter? Because AI is listening. It's looking at these sorts of things. It's asking what's consciousness. It's noticing Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. It's noticing metacognition. It's noticing they go together. It's going to start playing with this. And that's what our meditators do. That's what the yogi masters do. That's what I was doing. Every example I've given about dying and being alive again, bilocating and how I've done it a couple times, daydreaming, and I've been witness other places because I really wanted to be there. And so I am. Um, and we can do this. All of this is, and when you wonder, how does it tie in with disclosure and UFOs? Well, guess what? If there were other beings, would they have mastered AI? Would they have learned how to work with the technology? Would they have learned that they need to master it themselves? Yes, yes, yes. So
Hmm.
it's all connected. I can't really give a definition for consciousness other than to say it's a constantly, we're playing with it. Like we play with music. You can decide who are you to the level that you've practiced doing that. And this is what we call conscious. So anybody that even knows what I'm saying about that would be like, yeah, I think I can. Some people will say like, they're not the right audience. The ones who don't understand what I just said, they probably didn't stick with this conversation this far. They would have said, nonsense. This is ridiculous. But people that are still here can start understanding, like, yes, you can be the observer of yourself, just keeping a daily journal and start it by saying, it's called Iliism, like an old Greek word. Cynthia woke up today and she realized today's the day she gets to talk about all this fun stuff with Julie, and we're going to have so much fun. But I'm talking about myself third person. And I can do that. I can say, how is Cynthia feeling today? What does Cynthia need? And as I do it, I'm practicing being at a level of conscious agency that's a little above what we would call our egoic daily life. So that level of conscious agency is the one that can bilocate. I know I can be in two places at once. I know I can be dead and choosing to be alive again and like, well, there that one just crashed and burned, that version of Cynthia. This one has to be braver and more courageous and face whatever, like, yeah, whatever. Let's take it on because I know my life is not just my own. And all the versions of me that are that courageous were the ones that are here right now. And that changed in 2016. So I know this from an experiential standpoint. And that's how we learn. Each one of us who's listening to this, noticing, how many of these Mandela effects have we seen, these reality shifts? What does consciousness mean to each of us? Can you notice a higher order perception of something that was sensed on a sensory level? Yes, I'm sure all of us can do that. Now, can you take it to the next level? Can you observe your thoughts and feelings and know that's not really you? Those are just thoughts and feelings coming and going. And that is where consciousness really, that's like light speed. That's like, um, in the movie Star Wars, where they're just like, finally the Millennium Falcon finally works. Finally, we've got it.
Yeah, yeah, you're bringing up so much here, and my thoughts are all over the place about this because it is, when I was young, back 100 years ago, not quite, but feels like it. It just felt like, well, it was in the transition because I was born in the early 60s. And it was in the transition period. We were coming out of the 50s era. We were coming into the kind of this awakening of a new consciousness with the young people, kind of acting out against the machine, the what was. And it just very much felt like, when I look back on that, it just very much felt like everybody was running on a program. So if you're a woman, this is the program. This is what you do. If you're a man, this is the program. And you go to work for the company and you work for that company until the day you retire and they continue to pay you so that you can live the rest. People are not living like that anymore. We're and that was the way that the society as a whole, I'm making very huge generalizations, obviously, but society as a whole was very programmed in a way and very, kind of on a track. This is what we do. And it was very unconscious because you just got up every day and did the same thing that you did the day before. Um, and and our consciousness in some ways hasn't evolved beyond that because I think research shows that we do everything out of habit. Like 95% of everything we do in a day is out of habit. And my statistics are, don't take my statistics to the bank because they will not pay.
Mhm.
But I'm just
Right.
saying it's a high percentage of
Yes.
habitual, um, what we do. It's like when we leave our driveway, we tend to drive the same way. That's why sometimes when we're not heading to work and we're headed somewhere else, we turn like we're heading to work because that's our body's way of not having to keep track of so many things. I don't know what your thoughts are about that and the way, but I've also noticed over the last, I would say, probably honestly, since 2020, it feels like time has sped up
Yeah.
so fast. And I'm not just saying this as an older person, I'm hearing this from younger people too. I'm hearing this from my kids who are, young. And
Yeah.
I don't remember feeling that when I was their age, that time was moving so fast. But it just feels like time is moving so fast and time and I had a conversation with a friend today about this. Like it's almost like I'm losing touch with time where I used to be so tuned into it. And it just feels like it's all part of the same effect.
Yes. Yeah, it is related. Well, that first thing you talked about, the subconscious, well, you didn't call it subconscious, but kind of autopilot living.
Right.
Yeah, I get into this in my book Reality Shifts because that's where people are, and they don't question, they don't even, because if you have skepticism, that's a good thing, but you want to doubt even your doubts, and that takes courage, but that's the territory of folks who've had the near-death experiences that ties it back into that group of people we were talking about. You can't live on autopilot once you've had one of those near-death experiences. Mine was in childhood, so it was like that kept me on track from age 5. But it's a good thing when that keeps you on track because then it means that the likelihood that you'll be living on autopilot goes down. And you may wonder, why does that matter? Because these are challenging times, and to the degree that time seems to be going at a good, fast, rapid clip, that's an indicator that there's a possible way for you to reorient to what's going on, that there's something big happening on a collective level. And you can, ironically, to slow time down, slow yourself down. Just don't don't try to pack so much into a day. Be much more mindful of the moment you're in and just really expand it. It's kind of like a Zen thing to do. Very meditative, but it's a way to get your traction back on time. So it's like you and time are grooving together again instead of some sort of really unpleasant situation where it's yanking you forward way too fast. Yeah. So, and the thing why it matters to be conscious of your thoughts, and the reason I bring it up in my book Reality Shifts is because when we aren't, or the programming you're talking about is quite real, and we have beliefs that start operating in the background. And I've got a little section of my book in Reality Shifts where I take a belief, so you observe the thought forms that are running through. Remember, it's not you. These are just thoughts that are running through programming, saying like, "Wow, time is going too fast. I don't get enough done. I'm always late." Those might be beliefs, and you can flip them around to. I would recommend flip them to their opposite, so you've got an antidote to that thought form. So it's like I'm always just right where I need to be at the right time. I think I even have something like that as an example in the book Reality Shift. So it was written in the 1990s. So I was
Mm,
aware of the time thing back then because it starts happening when it's kind of like it's like there's a difference between one level of your consciousness and your daily life. And you want to get that lined up again. So that's if you wonder, what am I doing? You're lining up those levels of conscious agency again, so that you're properly connected. And when you are, it's a lot more pleasant. So
mm,
it's possible to do it. You can do it with mindfulness and with these belief affirmations because you're making a personalized affirmation out of the self-talk that seems kind of random when you look at it. Like, why would I believe I'm always late? That's random. Yeah, let's just flip it. I'm always in the right place at the right time. Yeah, I like that one. So,
mhm. Yeah.
so and it's a way to reprogram yourself.
That's really, I noticed, and I actually taught this not too long ago, this idea that started to recognize that there were certain thoughts that I was having about my emotions that were pretty habitual. And I honestly, I can't even remember what they are now,
Okay.
which is so funny. But, I would have on a regular basis a thought about an emotion, an uncomfortable emotion, like let's say like
Yeah.
I'm so frustrated or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And I would notice that there was like three or four of these that were pretty prominent. And so I thought, okay, is this really what I want running in the
Mhm.
background and running on my software?
Right.
And so then I'm looking at, okay, how am I reprogramming that
Yeah.
thought pattern to be something that's more advantageous, that's going to benefit rather than to create discomfort, dis-ease, distress, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, it's all so fascinating. I want to ask you about Albert Einstein because he's a scientific figure
Yes.
that everyone, I think, is familiar with, I hope.
Mm. Yeah.
And I feel like and I haven't studied. I'm not going to pretend that I've studied Albert Einstein. I've seen a handful of documentaries, that kind of thing only. But I've come across a handful of quotes. Like I actually have one of his quotes right here. There are only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle. I feel like, and you have so much more knowledge about this, but I feel like he was kind of the beginning
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
bridging this gap between what we considered reality and what our new reality is looking like based on new discoveries.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was people, so I can't even find one thread to follow. We talk about him. We could have the whole show just about Einstein. What a brilliant, brilliant individual. And
Right.
he really helped humanity understand so much about the nature of reality. And he's had that childlike wonder. which I think is what he's really getting at there in that quote, that beautiful quote, that it's important to keep that sense of wonder and awe. And that's so pivotal. And it seems like it gets beaten out of us often in school or by
Mhm.
parents, kind of like, well, you got to do what you got to do, stay in your lane, study what you're supposed to study, do what your programming is supposed to be. But that's not this time that we're in right now. This is meant to be a renaissance. It really is a birth of a new human way of being in the universe. This Einstein would love this time if he were alive right now. He would love it because it would be unsettling. He said some funny things about entanglement that he called it spooky action at a distance when two entangled particles instantly respond when they could be miles apart. And he called it spooky. So it's funny, but he had such a way of playfully looking at things, and I think he'd really appreciate what, like the experiments I'm talking about, that you can have those observers at the same place, same time, seeing two different things. He'd have a phrase for that for sure. It's like, well, what is that? Like, we really are living in many worlds, and he'd be saying things like that, and he had such a great audience thanks to his beautiful work that his platform, would carry these ideas wide and far. So I think his gift continues because you're quoting that and remembering the words that he's spoken. And
Yeah. Yeah, I love that quote so much because I've chosen to look at everything as if it's a miracle.
yes,
And so I really appreciated his words on that specific topic. What have we, I mean, I know we've just barely scratched the surface of all of this, and we've just created a very interesting opening into all this exploration. And for those who, well, and you touched on, let's go here because you touched on UFOs, you touched on this, the new Spielberg movie that's coming out.
yeah,
Disclosure Day, is that what it's called? Something like that. Anyway,
yeah.
um, share your thoughts, philosophies about that type of interaction with beings that are not of our planet.
Yeah, this ties in beautifully with the Albert Einstein quote. So it's really good to have a positive attitude. I like to ask the question, how good can it get? So I would ask, how good can disclosure get? If it's true, which it seems to be, that we've had millennia of contact with other beings wherever they may be from. Maybe they're from here. Maybe they're partly related to us. Who knows? It's a big mystery. But if we go into it with this openness of and wonder and awe, and a feeling of knowing that this connection is meant for all of us, that can be pretty good. So I feel like it's an invitation for us to really know ourselves because you can't really know yourself as a species until you've got like another family member. And you could say like, oh, Cynthia, we've had monkeys and chimps, and but is that really another family member? Kind of, in the same sense that I mean, I love trees and plants too, and I do feel like they're part of our family tree. They are. We're related to plants, animals, all of that. But what if there's another being who's also created artificial intelligence, who's made it through that very challenging transformation of what that does to a culture? And what if they're showing up right here, right now, partly because we've reached that step too? And that it's like a twin. We haven't talked about AI at all, but to me, that's all of this is connected. The fact that we've been playing with nuclear weaponry and UFOs have been seen on site at such facilities, stopping and shutting down nuclear testing. They can do
Mhm.
that. That reminds me of my topic of reality shifts, Mandela Effect. It's like, I know we can do that. So I see UFOs can do that. I see family. I see, like, okay, that's kindred, that's kin of some sort. And they're showing up right when I think we may be sending out a signal like we did with the nuclear stuff. Like, hey, we're growing up and we're having a little trouble here. We're standing and falling and tripping and, little help.
Yeah, we're screaming behind the nursery door.
Yeah, we're having trouble getting along with each other. It's like we're having trouble. We know the telepathy tapes are real, but we have not yet come to terms with how to be open and sharing with each other. Well, how can we manifest something if we still think our thoughts and our daydreams can be private and destructive and negative? How can we still be playing with that and moving forward? Can we? And these are challenging questions. So I think all of this comes into play, and it's a very exciting time to be alive. I feel like my life makes more and more sense the longer I live. I felt like a weirdo when I was little. Now I feel like ah ha ha, oh perfect.
Everybody else has grown into grown into it. Yeah. It again, it is just also fascinating. It's also awe-inspiring. I, I've more recently had these thoughts around, what would happen? What would happen if one day everybody just stopped watching the news?
Mhm.
Imagine what would happen. Like, I mean, it really, like, I go into my imagination and then go, I think, would some of the leaders who are getting attention for doing some of the negative things that they're doing, would they continue to do those things if there was no longer attention to what they were doing, right? If they were no longer receiving that type of feedback that is coming through our streaming, our constant streaming of what's happening around the world. Could could communities live in more peace and harmony because they're not so affected by what's happening 3,000 miles away from them? And it's not that we don't care about what's happening 3,000 miles away. That's not what I'm implying. But it's how can we create more peace within the communities that are actually peaceful, but are not peaceful because they're constantly plugged in to the areas where there's not peace. It's just a fascinating thing for my brain to
Yeah.
tumble around on and think about and wonder what would happen. But
Well, some of the wars that are going on are not being broadcast. Some of the atrocities, like in Africa, are not part of our news cycle at all.
mhm,
And I hear directly from some of those community members, thanks to the internet, they can write to me directly and say, like, this is really bad. Then I notice our news does not cover the atrocities happening in Africa at all. And like, why would that be? So I would hope that what you're saying is true, but what I'm already seeing is like, dang, we need help,
we
even
need
in
light
and
on
the
topics.
yeah,
I get
and
that.
I've been involved trying to bring light into my local politics where illegal activities and things have been happening. So even on a very small scale, and people, there's just been this sort of approach of bulldoze it through. And you might say, like, I live in Berkeley, California, so it's a
Hmm.
very liberal. So if you're thinking, well, they're just copying Trump, but why would they be doing that? I don't understand that. So I think what we're looking for is nothing short of an, um, an expansion of our own evolutionary consciousness. And I think that's what's about to happen for humanity. So it's going to be a little different than not having the news. It'll be more like suddenly a whole level of our own idea of self is going to come onto, it'll be like it activates. And all of us will be able to recognize, hey, I can bilocate. Hey, when I daydream, that's really happening. Do I want to be daydreaming something negative?
Hmm.
No. Hopefully, no. So it'll be a case by case.
Yeah.
It's gonna be huge, but it may happen gradually, probably not all at once.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point because I feel like if we had just as a collective, as humanity, if we had more empathy and more curiosity, that could solve a whole host of issues if we were willing to be open-minded enough to be curious and empathetic.
The fact that you're bringing up empathy, that's if there's a whole section I have in the book. I'm going to hold it up briefly. This book, The Mandela Effect and its Society. There's a section in there where people are wondering, what do we have in common? Those of us who notice the collective alternate memories, these Tinkerbell, the Fruit of the Loom cornucopia, all these things, the movies, dialogue, products, everything. What do we have in common? Guess what the answer is? You just said it. And it
Okay.
also comes up in Disclosure Day. Steven Spielberg says that's one of the key ideas in the movie, empathy. It's empathy. And when I had a conversation with Dr. Beitman on my Living the Quantum Dream podcast, I was asking him about his research into this field because he was noticing meaningful coincidences. That's what he calls it as a technical psychological term, which I would call synchronicity. And you know what? It dovetails right into reality shifts. So anybody that can experience a synchronicity, you're on track for reality shifts, the Mandela effect. Also, I think if you've seen a UFO, you're on track. You know, any of this stuff, near-death experiences, you're on track. You're part of the same group, and it has everything to do with empathy. And if you take the Myers-Briggs interest inventory, you can find out if you have the NF in the middle of it's four letters. So you'll get something like E or I for extrovert, introvert. Then you'll get like an N, which is intuitive, F, which is feeling. That's the definition of that's empathy, the way the psychologists are studying it. And guess who experienced the lion's share of the Mandela effect? It's the empaths, it's the intuitive feelers. Guess what the big point is in Disclosure Day, apparently? Empathy. And that's what you're wishing for. That's what's coming. That's what and I'm getting goosebumps on it right now. So that is going to be our human upgrade. Like it or not, kicking or screaming or not, we're going to get empathy, which is very much like a full life review for those of people that go to IAN's groups and like, what is that? Go to an IAN's group, find out, listen to the speaker, just be there and participate. You'll love it. If you've listened this far to this interview, you love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your wisdom, for sharing your experiences, for sharing your research and your knowledge. And I know, like I said, we've just barely you know, fingernailed the surface of this. But I'm excited to read your books, to learn more about this, and it's very, very fascinating. Thank you so much. Is there any last words of wisdom you would like to share with us? And also, where can we connect with you, Cynthia?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, my website is realityshifters.com. And I just ask everybody, please, please, please ask the question, how good can it get? With whatever else you're doing, whether it's a good day, it's like, hey, it's going great. Yeah, ask how good can it get? Raise the bar a little bit. If it's kind of meh, like middling, like not really impressive, ask how good can it get? Raise it a bit. And if it's really horrible, things are going really badly, and you feel like, what is this, sarcasm? Yeah, just ask it with all your heart, like this is so bad, so messed up. Can't believe it can get any worse than this. Okay, how good can it get? Ask it then too. Because when we all do this together, things can get really good. And that's what I'd like to see. That's what we need. That's what I'm here for. So I'm a radical optimist that way. And it's based on the work of John Archibald Wheeler. And like you said, Einstein, yeah, everything can be miraculous, especially when we're open to that.
Mm, love it. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your time and wisdom with us.